Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTGA podcast. Mikey Stafford and Rory O'Neill with you as always, and we are delighted to be joined by former president of the GAA, Liam O'Neill. He's joining us primarily to discuss the mooted or the reheated and new fresh hopes for the integration of the GAA, the LGFA, Camogie Association, Rounders and Handball, all a lot of them. But obviously it's the female Gaelic Games associations and the GAA who have for some time been looked at as perfect bedfellows, but haven't been thus far. And I think, Liam, we're getting you on because you probably tried as hard as anybody to square this circle. So first of all, how are you doing this afternoon, Liam?
Great, thank you very much. Delighted to be with you.
Great. We're delighted to have you, Liam. You were very honest at the end of your tenure. You said your biggest regret was the fact that you couldn't get further down the road with integration. I don't know whether you thought you could complete it in your term, or at least kind of get the ball moving. I suppose it'd be good to hear from you now before we get into the present. I guess how hard did you try? What form did your integration process take, and where did it come a cropper?
Okay, well, it started out from the fairness of it, I suppose, and the possibilities for the GAA Gaelic Games family, I suppose, really in the unified system that we wished for at that stage. We discussed it at Central Council. We were given permission to go and talk to the other bodies. We already had handball under our wing. It's not a separate organisation. It's been always under the wing of the GAA. So, and we had the World Championships in Dublin, and there were difficulties with handball financially at that time, and we solved those. And handball is happily in the GAA, although not directly reporting Central Council, but they are and always were part of the GAA. Rounders is slightly different. It's kind of the poor relation, probably the most inclusive of our 6 sports, in the sense that anybody can play it. And most of us have in our childhood at some stage played rounders. And I did a bit of work on developing that. We bought 1,000 bats because you can't play rounders without a bat. And I suggested to the council and to rounders that every time I go to a field, no matter where, and I visited a good few fields in my tenure as on, there are always children left out. And I thought, what about rounders? Why wouldn't we promote that, and why wouldn't we do something to include them? So that was that. So get back to the main issue then. I grew up in a family of 12. I had 7 sisters. I was born in 55, so that's a matter of public record, so I don't mind admitting that. During the 60s, there was nothing for girls, absolutely nothing. And I felt awful. They played with me. I had 3 sisters above me, by the way, and 3 below me. So I was nicely sandwiched in the group of 7 sisters, with the group of 7 sisters, but there was nothing. And I always felt guilty that the lads could go off to matches, go to the field, do things, and the girls were left out. Because Camogie was very, very weak in Laois at that time. Ladies football hadn't really been recognised. So it struck me as odd that we would be separate, because if you were designing the GAA right now, you would design a united organisation. There's no rocket science to that. It has in fact been done in Europe, that it is a united single organisation. And that's interesting. And I always said that the solution to the urban challenge in Ireland would be solved by people who worked in a situation where Gaelic Games was a minority sport, because they would have to devise methodologies of growth to promote growth. But it seemed to me that it had gone to a stage where somebody had to speak up and say, really, we should be doing something about unity. So we agreed that we would talk to the CEOs and Uachtaráin of the other 2 bodies. And we went as far as visiting each other's central councils. We went first to Camogie, Second meeting was Camogie and ladies football were to come to our central council. Ladies football didn't turn up. That should have been the first red flag, but we said there were probably reasons, okay? Then we went to a central council meeting of ladies football in Tullamore. Probably the most difficult and fractious meeting I attended in my entire GA life. And that's a big statement.
That's in anyone's GA life, that's a big statement. We've all been to fractious GA meetings.
Yeah, it was, yeah. We were blown out of the water, really. There were people lined up to take us on. We got support from significant people. I will never forget it to Michael Ryan from Waterford, who was a great promoter of ladies football with his club and his county, and was a hurling manager in Westmeath and a number of other counties, if you know the man I'm talking about.
Yeah, he managed Waterford as well at one stage.
Yeah. So he actually stood up for us. Pádraig and I were taking a fair hammering at the meeting, and we were accused of trying to take over ladies football. And the next president of the organization was very unfriendly. And significantly, one lady, she could only have been in her mid-20s, stood up and made an impassioned speech about that they weren't going to be sort of taken over after suffering 40 years of hurt. And she was only 26, so how she figured out she got 40 years of hurt into that, I don't know. But eventually it became very obvious we were going nowhere. And it fizzled out, quite frankly. We were told at the time to take 10 years. Significantly enough now, we're facing into the 10th year of that with nothing done. And we've been making noises about saying things are improving, and all the language used in the 10 years or so since we first suggested this has been about kind of implying, isn't it grand, or it's improving? And yet it's not. And the ladies players, Camogie and ladies, are coming out now quite openly and saying that they deserve equality. Mm-hmm. We always wanted them to have it. That's the irony of it.
Yeah. The one thing we do have, Rory, I suppose, to an extent that has come in the last decade or thereabouts is the one club model, which at a local level in a lot of places seems to work. How does it work for yourselves up in Donabate?
From our point of view, it absolutely works perfectly. I mean, we've all, like, since we brought it in, it came in a couple of years before I took over as chair, and it's like boys and girls pay the same membership. They're members of the same club. Why they wouldn't have access to the same facilities, the same level of coaching, the same level of competition, the same levels of facilities that we can make available to them? I mean, like, sometimes I get a little bit frustrated at this notion of inequality. I don't see it at ground level in my club, and I wouldn't stand for it either. I think it's, to my mind, it isn't an issue of inequality when it comes to what's happening at ground level. I think the inequality may come further up the food chain when you are looking to try and get access to facilities and different types of support structures that only the GAA really can deliver on. I think the GAA have access. They own all the grounds and they own all the pitches. I mean, the situation we saw, for instance, in the women's football semi-finals a couple of years ago, where Cork and Galway were told they were playing in Parnell Park, and then on the morning of the game was shifted to Croke Park. I mean, those types of situations, we've seen it actually with dual players, where Cork have been put under pressure in different scenarios, whereby the Camogie, like, they have quite a number of dual players, Hannah Looney, there's Breach Corkery, a load of girls who were kind of struggling because they were obviously being pulled by both organizations who were putting their fixtures on at the same time. I think if everything comes under the one umbrella, that problem doesn't, become as much of an issue. So I think the issue really isn't at ground level, as far as I can see. Not every club is operating the one club model. I think most clubs, if they had any cop on, I mean, look, most people will tell you, if you want to grow your membership and if you want to grow your club, grow your brand and grow your ability to really immerse yourself into a community, the really untapped growth market is the female one. So that makes absolute sense from any organization to really try and go after that, because they're 50% of the population, So I think from a club point of view, I don't feel it's as much of an issue, but I can't speak for every single club in the country.
Yeah. Liam, to people maybe outside, they'd look at the success of the one club initiative and say, well, this should crack it, because if you want to make change in any organization, it's from the ground up. So first of all, how would you assess the success of the one club kind of initiative, in terms of exactly what it is, a local it's a local action, but then also maybe explain why you don't think it's had more of an impact at the upper echelons of the organizations.
Because first of all, the upper echelons, the organisation, certainly in ladies football, didn't want it. So that has changed a bit, and that's great. The difficulty about in Rory's club there, the one club model is possibly because he has a big enough population base to field single teams on their own the whole way up.
That's true.
Yeah. Also, you said that underage pay the same membership. Do the adult males and females pay the same membership?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
but it costs more to affiliate to ladies football and Camogie than it does to the GAA.
This is a minefield, which I'm happy to get into, Liam.
Yeah,
but it's a real bone of contention for clubs, that particular point. Sorry.
Yeah, and that is really to sustain 3 organizations.
Correct. Yeah. We got hit with a levy this year, Liam. We were hit with a levy. Every club was hit with a levy of €250 from the LGFA. We still don't really know what it was for. We were kind of told that it was to cater for insurance or something along those lines. Look, we paid it, obviously. But I just thought it was a bit bizarre. Camogie, we've subsequently now entered, we're now part of the Camogie Association as well, because we've started Camogie in the underage ranks. This is an organization in its infancy, and they weren't looking for any levy. So I was curious on that every club was being hit with this same levy now.
Yeah. And I suggested to the leaders of the other organizations that if we weren't prepared to unite, how could we in all conscience face people like you on the ground and say, hey, you should unite, but we're not going to? And that was always bizarre to me, but the cost factor is significant. And the fact that a woman, female, wants to be a member of her GA club, also wants to play ladies football and maybe handball, she would pay 3 memberships.
Yep.
100, if there was 50, say, average for each of them, she would pay 150, whereas I would pay 50. Not sustainable, really, and no need for it. But there is another side to it, and in a county like Laois, where we haven't many clubs anyway who can field single teams from under 6 to adult without joining with other clubs to form independent teams at underage level. There are complications there, but there are also complications where there was a ladies football club, or indeed a Camogie club. And we've had a good few Camogie clubs set up in Laois over the last 5 years. Thankfully, it's the numbers playing have increased dramatically. But you might have a club based on, say, in Camogie, on a hurling club, but would be feeding from the female membership of 3 or 4 other hurling clubs to have enough to field teams. Now, the one club model is a more complicated, it's not impossible, nothing is impossible, but it's a more complicated structure than it would be in your club, because to whom does the female belong? Yeah, and that can be overcome. You see, we could have a basic GAA membership, and then a further top up to be associated with your club to vote at an AGM, because you can only vote at one AGM. Unless you paid it for memberships to each one. So that's a little bit more complicated outside of the big urban areas than it is in the urban areas. But that's not an excuse. Significantly now, Mary McLeese has been asked to chair this group that are going to, she is the independent chairperson of the process. Mm-hmm. She asked me about it when I made the offer and said, what's the problem? And I said, people see more problems than solutions. And she just said to me, as a person who was sitting beside me making conversation, she said, but we have the brightest young people in the world. We have excellent people who are excellent in business. We have a great ideas pool. Surely, she said, it's not beyond our collective ability to find a solution to this. And I said, oh, Tyrone, you are 100% right. So it was with great pleasure that I heard of her appointment, because she sees the possibilities, not the difficulties, and always did. And I think that was a trademark of her presidency. She saw possibilities. And this,
what's her terms of reference going to be?
I don't know that, because it's only announced. And, you know, I'm gone since 2015. And I do get the bulletins, but the bulletins just announced it. And I'm not directly involved in GEA leadership committees at the moment. I do leadership courses and club planning for the GA, but I'm actually sitting on the resource management team, which is the equivalent of Coiste Banishty at Camogie as a guest. And I'm delighted to do that. So, because I've seen a different perspective. But really, and I've said it to Camogie should always have looked to join us, not necessarily as a three-pronged unity, but they should have joined the GA, because there was more willingness in Camogie to join at that time.
I'm obviously conscious we have a former GA president here, and we don't have a former LGFA president with us. So I'll play devil's advocate, I suppose, and just, you know, from the LGFA's point of view, they are as far as I can see at a national level, from a media standpoint, which would obviously be one I'd be quite familiar with. They're pretty successfully run. They've got a national broadcast deal. They've got good sponsors, good advertising campaigns. Underage club level seems to be really well run. They seem like their participation numbers are huge. So they see, the big bad beast from Croke Park hovering over them, looking to absorb them. Why should they make that deal? I suppose, Liam, is the question. You get it from the outside. For somebody who has no skin in the game, you could kind of say, why would a smaller sporting organization want to be, taken on by another one and kind of just become, kind of a department of a bigger organization? I guess that's probably where their issue comes from, is it?
But Mikey, just before Liam comes in, one thing I would say, they still have little or no facilities of their own or rights to any of those. That's the big thing for me, is that if they were to come in under one umbrella, the GA is a social democracy, they would automatically be entitled to access rights to all the facilities. They wouldn't have to go to Croke Park and say, can we play our matches on the third Sunday in September or the third Sunday in August? It would just be a given. Sorry, Liam.
Yeah, that's a fair enough point. And yes, they would be entitled to the property. And quite frankly, people talk about pitches being overused. As I drove around the country during my presidency, and I still keep an eye out, there are an awful lot of pitches underused at the moment. And that's something we have to sort of face up to. Why would they join? We didn't suggest really that they should join. We actually made the offer to them if they wished to join. And that was the way it was put, because you can't force a marriage. You have to people have to want to do it. And why would they do it? They do it because if in your club, Rory, I bet your children play the Go games, and boys and girls up to the age of 11,
under 12,
under 12, are entitled to play together. Now, the good thing from the wider GEA family point of view is, and will be with Camogie with you from now on, is that we actually already trained the girls up as far as 11. And the ladies Gaelic football and Camogie, in places where the Go games operate up to under 11, 12, they're handed a cohort of players who are already well on the way to being skillful and to being proficient in the skills needed for the games. So that's working already. But a lot of that is the reason for the success. And nobody begrudges that. Absolutely nobody, because the modern family, unlike the family in which I was reared, the modern family wants the boy and girl treated equally and wants to bring them to the one venue. And the reason you have the numbers you have up as far as under 12 is because you look after the girls as well as the boys. And it's not rocket science. That's in a modern urban family, people expect that. They don't need to be driving around twice and 3 times. They go to the one venue, they're all looked after. And that's why. So if it works at that level, Why wouldn't it work beyond that?
Mm.
The answer is, of course it would. Now, would there be fixtures difficulties? Would there be awkwardnesses around access to pitches? Yes, there might be, but that exists as it is. But this unity would provide the means by which that could be solved.
The to an extent, and this is probably true with some members of the Camogie Association as well, I would imagine at the administration level, kind of wondering about, kind of their power being denuded or diluted, or administrations being thrown up in the air and reconfigured. Was that ever an issue within the GAA? Because obviously the makeup of management committee, central council, even Congress, it would have to be split three ways. So I'm wondering, the old expression, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. Did you ever meet any resistance within the GAA from people who might think that their place on a significant committee or something might be lost to somebody from the LGFA or the Camogie Association?
Absolutely. Of course. That's human nature, because the first thing happens when change is mooted. Most people will say,
how's it going to affect me?
That's exactly it. How is that going to affect me? And if it affects me in any way negatively, they won't support it. And that's the reality of life. Of course there would be. There would have been more fear probably in the other two organizations, because the people who had positions there in a one committee situation, the division by three would affect some of them more, really. And there was a fear on that, but it also existed on the GA side. And someone told me afterwards, a fairly senior official told me that I was probably lucky they didn't say yes, because he said you would have been faced with the monumental headache of making it work. Now it's going to be done by a process of agreement, and that will make it easier.
Liam, could I ask though, when this didn't work under your tenure, if I can remember correctly, the GAA, not the LGFA or the Camogie Association, seemed to attract some negative publicity around the fact that, like, it was nearly, because the GAA nearly gets blamed for everything anyway, and that it was the GAA's fault for not making it work. Is there an element of, I don't want to be using a term like a patsy, but like by putting somebody of the profile and stature of Mary McAleese front and center, and then if it doesn't work, for the GAA to say, well, look what we tried to, look what we got on board, and if she can't make it work, well then, there you go.
Yeah, that's the other reason I'm really pleased that Mary McAleese has been appointed, because what happened to me was I became the focus of the negativity for daring to suggest it. And when you want to attack an idea and you don't want to do it, you have to find somebody who's the target. And I became the target. And even after Congress this year, I predicted before Congress, by the way, in another podcast, that I would become the target. So the easiest thing is to attack the person. But now that's taken away, and there's an open discussion, and people have to come up and give their reasons and negotiate honestly. And my big wish for this push is that people do that honestly. Let's lay out the problems. Assess them, and find solutions to them. And it can be done. It has been done in Europe spectacularly, and I see no reason why it couldn't be done here. The other difficulty that it could help on is this push for equal membership, gender balance. If we were United Organizations, we have two organizations that are entirely female, one male, so it would redress that imbalance. A method would have to be found, though, not necessarily to you'd have to include everyone. It'd have to be open, it'd have to be fair, but you still have to have the right to vote. People still have that, and they have that in Europe. They could technically have 3/4 of their board female if the elections worked out that way, and they're quite open to that. And we will have to face that. And yes, there will be a lessening of the number of jobs available for people at the level that, let's say Central Council, Cushtabanishti, bigger committees in Croke Park. We'll have to face that, but you won't solve this problem without some people, or maybe all of the people involved, swallowing a little and sacrificing a little of what they have for the greater good.
Sorry, Mikey, I just have one other question, because I know it's a big thing. It's a big talking point, we'll say, in my club anyway, and across the board, is the area around player insurance. Now, as we know, the GAA operates its own insurance scheme in terms of medical bills, etc., because it became so unwieldy. They decided to take it in-house, and look, it works fine. I think it's 30% of whatever you end up claiming for, and that's fine. And they had to put a cap on it because, as we know, people were taking advantage. Okay. Now, my understanding is the LGFA are still going through a broker. So that would then obviously be one, and people might say, oh, that's like boring. Sure, look, they can just come in under the GAA's insurance scheme and that would be sorted. But that then is all of a sudden is a huge extra raft of people that are going to be pulling out of the insurance scheme. Now, obviously, your membership will shift to a central pool, which will offset some of that. But it is a big issue in terms of what Mary McAleese might face, which she may not be appraised of going into it in terms of the intricacies of how this whole thing is going to be managed.
Yeah, most people in the GA don't understand our player injury benefit scheme.
They don't. No,
it's not an insurance story. It's a benefit scheme.
Yeah, it's a benevolent. Yeah.
We made two big attempts, one in the 80s, I think, and one after, to get players to pay their own insurance premium. And guess what?
They wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it. So we had to protect them from themselves with the player injury scheme. Now, that is administered by a broker, but it is the GA resources. It's administered by a broker to stop people fiddling the scheme, for want of a way of putting it. Because
and there was people. I know. Anyway,
there were. In my time as Oak Run, or maybe slightly before, there was one club that were systematically fiddling the scheme. And they couldn't be punished because they took the case as far as they could, but they were let off because there was no rule in the book specifically dealing with a club that fiddled the scheme. Yeah. And they got off on the technicality. It was bizarre, absolutely bizarre.
Classic.
Yeah.
GA white collar crime. I love it.
Yeah. But I suppose the point I'm making, Liam, is that these are the little. These are the hurdles that people are going to have to jump if this thing becomes reality. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. Was it Albert Reynolds said famously, it's the little things trip you up?
Yeah.
Well, there are lots of difficulties, and there will be difficulties. There will be some stuff that will be very difficult to iron out. And can I just go back on one thing? When you talked about ladies football and the performance done, I have huge admiration for what Helen O'Rourke has done with ladies football. Absolutely brought the profile dramatically up, and it's wonderful, and it benefits us all. And even though we mightn't have seemed to be in agreement on this particular process, I would still admire her hugely and say that she has contributed enormously to the Gaelic Games effort, just in case anybody is in any doubt about that. Now, we don't agree on everything, and I think she made that quite clear. that's a different issue.
On the Camogie front, this is one actually, I read an interesting column from former Tipperary Camogie star Emer Ryan in the Examiner. And it's a fair question. She said, as you just said, there's going to be lots of little things here and lots of big things. And this is an interesting one. If the Camogie Association becomes part of the GA, will the sport still be called Camogie, or will it become women's hurling? Because they play hurling, but it's called Camogie. It's the name of the association. It's historically the name of the sport. It mightn't be the biggest issue, but at the same time, it is actually a very big issue because we're talking about the actual name of a sport here, and that's just one example of the thousands of little issues that there will be here, isn't it? Absolutely,
yeah. And I did a consultative process with. I appointed a youth committee in my time as president to include the voices of young people, and we visited clubs, we visited a team of people doing it, and we visited third level institutes. And the message from most of the players who expressed a view on it, they wanted ladies hurling. Women's hurling, whichever way it was.
Squatted hurling.
Yeah. The other thing, that I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, Gaelic football is Gaelic football, hurling is hurling. We can accommodate Camogie and ladies football easily. That would be the least of our problems if we got that far. And nobody in the United Organisation could force those who have played Camogie up to this point to change the name of it. It wouldn't be a deal breaker as far as I'd be concerned.
Yeah. It's just a nice example.
It is an example
of all these little hurdles there are. I suppose then finally on this issue, Liam, as a man who gave it his all, how do you fancy Mary's chances here? She's obviously a formidable woman, and she's known as a builder of bridges. She's brought more disparate groups together than LGFA, CA, and GAA. So, do you think she has a chance?
Absolutely. I would have great confidence that she will do it. But she will do it by managing to do that. And she is expert at bringing people together. But I hope people embrace this opportunity now openly and honestly and say, yes, this is for our good. Let's see how we can do it. I think it's a wonderful compliment to the GAA family that a person of Mary McAleese's status would do this for us. And that's the success of the GAA, that we can get people to do voluntarily for us what you couldn't pay money for, and have someone of her status willing to do that. But that's why I wanted to make a point early on. She did ask at the time when I tried it, she did make the statement, surely it's not beyond our collective ability. And she's right. If we want to do this, we can do it.
Yeah.
And what kind of time frame would you see, Liam? How long is a piece of string?
Yeah, I'd say it certainly could be done, could be completed in 3 years.
Wow.
You wouldn't have to. It's once you start. It's like when you start breaking down walls or even building walls. It goes quicker as you do it. The main thing would be to start, get the ball rolling, and it might even come quicker than that. I think people would be fearful of a quick fix, and I can understand that. But if it took 3 years, what about it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if the end goal is achieved, and if little boys and little girls could say, we're going to grow up in organisations that values us equally? Wouldn't that be a marvellous achievement?
Yeah, and no more fixture clashes, no more dual player conundrums. It would be fantastic. Well, we have it would be nice to get your opinion, Liam. Obviously, the lack of intercounty action has slowed the GAA news cycle considerably, but in some ways, unfortunately, the GAA is still grabbing headlines, and the issue of abuse of referees, physical, verbal, etc., is rearing its head in Roscommon, Mayo, Kerry, Wexford. It's always been there.
Was there something in
Watford as well? It's an under-12 match, I think. It's not as if it ever went away, Liam, but it's unfortunate the way these things do. They tend to flare up, but in one way, is it almost fortunate for them to flare up because it can't be ignored? And this seems like something that the GAA really needs to grasp. And to me, as a very polite and never in any trouble junior hurler, I would say I think the GAA rulebook in some respects kind of needs to be torn down and rebuilt here, because as with your example of diddling the insurance fund, like the GAA rulebook is constructed in such a way that if something's not in it, it's not in it. And if something has a maximum, penalty, which I think for abusing a referee is 96 weeks or something, that's it. That's as high as you can go. And for a lot of us now, looking at these stories and the impact that they're having on games administration and the supply of referees, a 96-week ban to me seems like pretty small beer when the actual, kind of the facilitation of games is at stake here to an extent.
Very long question.
It was, sorry. I turned into a bit of a rant.
First of all, can I say, I really admire the stance taken by the Wexford County Board Chairman, Micheál Martin. Faced the thing honestly and openly and didn't shirk it, didn't try to hide, didn't try to say it's improving or whatever. He said what he said very directly, and I really admire him for that. Our rule book only allows for a 48-week suspension. That's the max you can give. That's across the board. But there is another option. And can I say that in my time as Leinster chairman, I went further than that over a person who got over a fence, climbed over a fence, and did damage on the surface.
You can be expelled, can't you?
I expelled a man.
Yeah.
And I said it was a clear message. In fairness, he took it well. He knew he had done wrong. He knew he had misbehaved. He knew it was outrageous. And I took the line that rather than find the club, which is the easy thing to do, and hit the volunteers again, I had a policy in discipline that just you punish the perpetrator of the offence, whatever the offence is, whether it's on the playing field or off it. And we did that, and we expelled him. And in fairness to him, he took it manfully. And the message I was trying to give was, there's no acceptable, I've said this anyway, on the field or off, there is no acceptable level of violence. Absolutely not. And whether you push a referee or whether you trip him or whether you hit him, whatever, they're all very serious. A person doesn't leave his family and his home and go out to referee a match to do anything other than the best job he or she can do. And I think we have to get that across in society. And the excuses are just that. But I think that because the GAA is a grassroots organisation, because it's a community organisation, people will stand by the person and say, well, you know, Rory's a nice man. He's most of the time, he's great. Does great work in the club. After sometimes he just loses his head at games. My answer to that is no. The person who, the part of the Rory who loses his head at the games, that has to be dealt with too. Yep. Nothing excuses. I don't care what voluntary work that person would do at the club. When you step over the line, you must be punished. Now, Micheál Martin said it was a societal issue, and it is certainly, there's no doubt about that. But we have to face it. We have to do our bit, and we have to show leadership on it. And I like the idea of them bringing a motion to Congress. It puts it on the agenda, and we really can't expect. I did refereeing for 2 years myself. I often said that it was the only part of GAA involvement where I got advice every time I went out.
That begs the question, Liam, why only 2 years?
I don't know why that was, because it was challenged at some stage. But the rule is that a suspension of more than 2 years, I think the thinking was that it wasn't improved by doing 3 or 4, that the next option, and I think when that rule was first thought of, the expulsion was thought of as a more likely option than it has become over the years. It's significant. There aren't, you don't hear of it very often.
No. Do you think it should be used more often?
Absolutely, absolutely. Why would any organisation tolerate a person who lets it down? Lots of organisations refuse membership. If somebody misbehaves in a golf club, nobody would be surprised at them being happens
all the time in a golf club.
It does.
It happens all the time in a golf club.
Yeah,
like
but,
they throw people out all the time.
Yeah, but and it's acceptable. But we're an amateur organisation. We have to and I think that an amateur organisation should be big enough to say we will be accountable to the highest possible standards, whether that's governance or discipline or whatever.
It's a cultural thing, though, Liam. I mean, you're trying to shift the culture, and when something is as endemic as refereeing abuse as it has become, I mean, I tried to bring in a zero tolerance approach in our club, but like there's always one or two that you're kind of going, geez, there he is again, so when you're trying to shift that mindset, like that's a very difficult thing to do, number one. And number two, if I could ask you, do we educate people enough on the rules? I have an awful feeling that a big part of the reason why people give out about referees is the people that are giving out actually don't know the rules.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100%. And I did suggest at one stage that we should have a rules test for a person to be allowed back after a suspension for abusing a referee. Yeah. It's hard to implement that sort of thing, but if we had that code in clubs, and if we said, you know what, Liam, you're not going to be allowed back until you actually learn the rules and do a test on them. It's a bit like if you have severe motoring offences in some countries, they make you resit the test, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there should be a test, and the person actually should be asked to prove that they know the rules better than the referee. Because quite frankly, anybody who abuses a referee doesn't.
Exactly.
Do you think the GAA rulebook in this area specifically, do you think it's fit for purpose, or do you think there is need for perhaps a special congress or to have a look at the grades of the punishment?
Yeah, it's fit for purpose if it was implemented, and if the appeals process was such that you couldn't take it on. When you're cited in other sports, and that term is used often in rugby, you answer for your offence. You're brought into to account for it. We are slower to do that because the Irish man does not like rules, first of all, and he doesn't like being made keep rules, And I've often said, my brother lived on the continent for a long time, and his attitude to a rule was, oh God, I must obey that. The Irishman's attitude is, how can I get around that? And that's endemic in us, and it's back to the cultural and historical thing. But you're asking me, how could you change the culture? Very easily. Implement the rules. Say the first point is, if you misbehave, you are expelled. Gone. Simple as that. Start doing that, and people will cop on pretty quickly. This is not being accepted. If you don't do it, no amount of sanctimonious talk will make up for the fact that you weren't able or brave enough to say to someone, your behavior is unacceptable. We don't want you. We don't need you. Leave.
Thanks very much, Steve. I wasn't clear on the question a minute ago. I asked you why only 2 years, and you took it as me asking about the maximum ban. I was actually asking, why did you only referee for 2 years?
Oh, beg your pardon. I only refereed for 2 years because I got so much helpful advice, and I was involved in administration, and I was, at an officer at county level, and I felt that it was unfair to be on both sides of it, to be refereeing and to be maybe sitting in on discipline decisions as well. And I thought that really you should do one or the other. Yeah. And I found, just interestingly enough, people often ask me about this, which was the more complicated to referee, although the rules of hurling are more complicated. Basically, I said that I was perfectly happy refereeing football, because if 2 people or 3 people clash in football, basically you can point any direction you like, as long as you stick with your decision. So,
it's true enough. Maybe you're better off with the cut and thrust of the committee room and the meeting room.
I think I escaped with only having to do 2 years. Yeah. What I do, it did give me an understanding of the difficulties referees have, because you have to do it sometimes to realize. And of course you made mistakes. Of course I made mistakes. Everyone does. But there has to be a sort of an acceptance. That's part of the bounce of the game.
Absolutely, it is. Liam, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. Myself and Rory will be back next week, and we do have some Cavan senior football on the television on Saturday evening on RTE2.
Crusher Law versus Gowna Cavan semi-final, and should be good. Like we had the Cavan final last year, and it was an absolute.
Oh yeah, that was a great
game of football.
What time is that on?
7 o'clock.
Right, there won't be a cow milk. There won't be a cow milk.
Thank you very much, Liam, and thank you all for listening. And we'll chat to you next week. Good luck. Goodbye.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.